Garris and Global Human Resources. I'm Marissa, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the Training and Development Expatriate Program. Specifically, I wanted to look at what factors need to be addressed to ensure a comprehensive plan to train all expatriates. Some things I looked into when deciding if the program needs a complete overhaul or just a few adjustments would be expatriate feedback. They're going to be the best people to talk to about the current program, what they liked, what they didn't like, what worked, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, what we didn't even touch on that they were introduced to. And then a few other things I looked at were maybe creating and distributing other surveys to other people in the organization if they were going to go on an assignment, what they would want to be trained on before they went. So the key challenges in training expatriate employees are going to be the unknown, obviously a language barrier, and then any cultural differences, because there's always going to be cultural differences. So expatriates have knowledge of the process of their local organization. They know how the business works, and that is the appeal of sending them on an assignment to a different country versus hiring someone locally. But if the employee has never visited the country they'll be working and living in, not knowing what to expect will be a challenge when you're trying to train them. So an interesting article I found described, training expatriates as ascertaining the cultural awareness and the fit for host country's culture, planned intervention designed to increase the knowledge and skills of expatriates to live and work effectively and achieve general life satisfaction in an unfamiliar host country. And so, one of the goals in training expatriate employees is giving them the tools to acclimate to living in their new country. Training should not only focus on adjusting to working in a new environment, it should also include cultural awareness, language, and a program to support their spouses and children if that is applicable. So, some essential components of pre-departure training and continuing development would be, according to our book, its studies indicate that the essential components of pre-departure training programs that contribute to a smooth transition to a foreign location include cultural awareness training, preliminary visits, language instruction, assistance with practical day-to-day matters, and security briefings. Training on a few areas is better than no training at all. Our book talked about book field surveys, and the survey, it depends on the organization and where the assignment is and who they send. So, but overall, 0% voted that the training had little or no value. And then obviously communication is important. Communicating with them before they leave, while they're there, and when they come home, so they're not, so it reduces their culture shock, and then they're not anticipating things back home not changing while they're away. And then having also them communicate with you what they're learning, what they're doing, what they're seeing, and how that can apply to the organization and the assignment they're on, as well as the organization at home. So cultural awareness training seeks to foster an appreciation of the host country's culture so that expatriate can behave accordingly. So expatriates, when they're in a different country, they need to be able to conduct business professionally, but they also need to acclimate to their host country personally. So they can't just be in the office working all the time. They want to experience the culture and the food and the people and the nightlife and the day-to-day, what they can do. So if they don't know what to expect or they don't know the culture, they not only risk embarrassing themselves and the organization. They risk not having a good time, not having a good experience, and not wanting to continue their assignment. And when training, it's best to avoid the museum approach. And this was described as attendees briefly being exposed to a catalog of cultural artifacts and traditions. It's doubtful minorities or the situational nuances typical of cross cultural encounters. Moreover, the artificial adoption of presumed idiosyncratic cultural phrases or traits for report development run the risk of appearing insincere or patronizing. So you don't want to send them off to a country with just kind of a base surface knowledge of what to expect and them come off fake or um, stupid or, misstepping on anything. Another training method would be preliminary visits. So, a well planned visit for the candidate and spouse provides a preview that allows them to assess their suitability and interest in the assignment. So, our book talk about this a lot. It will allow them to get a sense of how business is done and kind of immerse them in the culture. But you need to be careful that this visit is catered toward the intended position, what they'll be working on, what they'll be doing, where they will be, other employees they'll be working with, and not too touristy and vacation like, because that will give them a false sense of the assignment and the culture and what they're there for. Obviously, they're going to get language training. English is not always the first language, and I think a lot of us have a false sense that everyone knows English when that just is not true. Clearly, the ability to speak a foreign language can improve the expatriate's effectiveness and negotiating ability, as well as improve the adjustment of family members. As has been pointed out for a long time, it can improve managers' access to information regarding the host country's economy, government, and market. So, if there is a language barrier, that can lead to the expatriate ineffectively leading a position. The last thing they need when they're on an assignment, going, learning a new culture and a new language and a new country, is not being able to access the information they need to do the job they're there to do. And then kind of having a divide between them and their coworkers because of that language barrier. So training them and getting them at least able to communicate with their coworkers is going to be a key in training. And then another thing we looked at is practical assistance. So don't just, get them a visa and get them a ticket and send them on their way. They, not that you want to handhold either, but just kind of prepare them for as much as you can. Help them get their visa, help them find a home, help them find a school if their kids are going. Maybe a job for their spouse, anything that they're going to need, and you can prep before they leave is going to be helpful. Because again, once they're there and out of sight, being helpful might take some time because then you're dealing with the time difference. So anything you can do beforehand is good. And then managing their expectations. So making sure they know the assignment, why they're there, what they're going to be working on, introducing them to any coworkers you can before they get there. So they're not just walking in blindly to this new assignment. Is going to be helpful and it's going to make their experience that much better. Then the last thing we wanted to train them on is security briefings. And again, security is going to be an issue depending on where they go. Hopefully, we're not sending in people to war-torn countries all of the time. It's probably going to happen from time to time, but according to our book, expatriates increasingly relocate to locations where personal safety may be a concern and therefore present increased and unfamiliar threats to their health, safety, and security. Again, this is going to deal with managing their expectations of where they're going and what it's really going to be like. And then just making sure there's a plan in place and they know what that plan is. And then a SHRM article pointed out before any employee enters a high risk area, an employer should recognize and establish their duty of care and create and communicate an emergency plan to all affected employees. So, just kind of go through protocols with them, what they're supposed to do, where they're supposed to be, what time they should be there, who they should report to, or if it's, always having like their stuff ready to go, get on a plane, get on a train, and get out, or if they need to be trained in like active shooters or bomb threats or kind of similar stuff to what we do here, but the likelihood is increased that it could happen. So make sure they are taking that seriously and they know the risks. So, essential challenges of pre departure training and continuing development would be not only pre departure training. So, you want to continue to train them while they're on their assignment and when they come back, not only before they leave. Because if you train them on what you think they need to know and they walk in and it's different, they need to be able to communicate and get support from the organization back home, HR back home. Again, I know I said managing expectations already, but it's really important that they know as much of what to expect before they leave and while they're there, and understanding that while they're there, things back home are changing, and they could potentially be under new leadership when they come home. There might not be a role for them. Um, and whatever else can relieve their culture shock and prepare them not only for the culture they're going into, but changes that can be anticipated when they come back. And then understanding that there is obviously a learning curve, time for them to get acclimated to their job and their coworkers and their new surroundings is important too. So, some advantages of an external consulting firm for pre departure training and continuing development would be bringing in an expert, someone that has done this at different organizations, has been able to travel, and this person can tell them what they're walking into, what to expect, and that kind of takes it out of the organization's hands. And I think that could kind of be appealing, because if you have not been an expatriate and you haven't been to this country and you don't know what to expect, it's going to be more difficult to train people on what to expect. Another advantage would be focusing on other areas of the expatriate assignment. So if you have someone that is just focused on training, you can focus on getting them like their visa and somewhere to live and their assignment and details and meeting with coworkers and all of that other stuff that you may not focus on while you're focused on language and preliminary visits and security and all of that. So, a few disadvantages. The consultant kind of controls the flow of information, and the organization's going to have no control over what they say and what they teach and what they tell them. And that can be a problem, especially if they maybe aren't totally sold on this idea, and this consultant comes in and totally changes their mind and they don't want to go now. And then another disadvantage would be the home organization unaware of any difficulties that the expatriate is then facing when they're on their assignment. So if they are trained in a way that they don't realize or understand that they can reach out to their home organization for support and things they're going through and some help, then that's a problem. So again, it's just making sure everything is communicated with them. Then we looked at re-entry shock. So, as an expatriate is on an assignment, their life at home is still going. So it's not like they press pause, get on a plane, do an assignment, come back, and it's all the same. So things I think they are nervous about are career anxiety, work adjustment, new role demands, loss of status and pay, family adjustment, social networks, and possibly their effect on their partner's career. Um, the top one probably being career anxiety. I think it's nerve wracking when you leave and you're on this assignment and you're like doing all this good, and you come home and there might possibly not be a role for you in the organization, or um, no, they're not as excited to have you back as you wanted them to be, or they don't allow you to share your knowledge on everything you learned. Then obviously you have to readjust to your life and your role um, in your country before you left. If there is a role for you, it's probably shifted some, and so adjusting to that. Um, and then loss of status and pay. So maybe your assignment, you were a manager and you come back and you're not a manager, or it seemed like you made more as an expatriate than you do as a full time hourly employee. And then just readjusting to your family again. If you're gone, then you have to come back and get reused to how things were before you left, or if you took your family with you, readjusting everyone to life before they left. Social networks, just reacclimating with everyone socially. And then effect on a partner's career. So if you took this assignment and they didn't go with you, then what that looks like. And if they did go with you and they couldn't find a job, or they still tried to work their job from another country, I guess adjusting to that and what that now looks like. Objectives of a good mentoring system for international assignments. Sorry. Um, so, existing research reveals that mentoring leads to higher motivation, improved job performance, and greater retention and more efficient succession planning. Multinational enterprise also may act to assign home sponsors or mentors to hold them responsible for keeping the expatriate in touch with changing conditions in the home country. So, again, it's just managing expectations, um, letting them know that, hey, things are changing. This is what changed, and keeping that communication with them open and trying to reduce their culture shock as much as possible when they come home. So, measuring the effectiveness of pre departure training and on site mentoring programs is going to depend on the organization. So, about 1/3 of expats that were surveyed were still filling temporary assignments 3 months after coming home. More than 3/4 felt that their permanent position upon returning home was a demotion from their posting abroad, and 61% said they lacked opportunities to put their foreign experience to work. No wonder the average turnover rate of returning professionals reaches 25%. So this obviously is from 1999. It's changed a little bit, but still the concerns are the same. And again, it goes back to communication and managing expectations and reducing culture shock. And then return on investment is going to depend on the organization and what they put monetary value on versus non-monetary value. And then communicating with the employee, the expatriate, and what they thought of the assignment. And each organization, how they measure their return on investment is going to be different. So I think it's a good thing to look at, but it's not going to be the same across the board for every organization. A biblical perspective I looked at was Proverbs 24:27. Do not lurk like a thief near the house of the righteous. Do not plunder their dwelling place. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again, but the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. So I think in looking at this, it was a lot about managing expectations, what we can train you on, and how we could communicate with you before you leave, while you're gone, and when you come back. And so, even though you might stumble and fall down a few times, get back up, do it again, ask questions, communicate, and that goes for both parties. So, in conclusion, to successfully launch new ventures abroad and gain advantage over competitors, companies generally bring in their own experts from other locations to lead projects on a short term basis rather than rely on local talent. I think that's sort of unfortunate because I think the local talent needs to work with the expatriate to um, gain knowledge both culturally and in the business, and employee feedback, mentoring, pre-departure, on assignment, and upon return communication is going to help the most. So I think with a few tweaks, this program will be successful and it doesn't completely need an overhaul.